All right. What are we going to talk about today? Hopefully, something that will get some clicks, that will get some algorithmic attention. It's going to be Hoeflation. Now, I'm wearing my wizard hat today because I heard if you can remain a sensitive young man and avoid the disgusting embrace of these Jezebels up to the age of 30, you will become a wizard. And who would not want to be a wizard? Well, pretty much no one wants to be a wizard, but it is increasingly an unfortunate reality for a lot of people because of Hoeflation. I'm going to give you a quote from an economist. I don't have an economist hat. Does this look like an economist hat? I don't know. We'll keep the wizard hat. Inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. That's from Milton Friedman. What does that mean? That means inflation is always the result of too much money, of money supply going up. What does that have to do with hoes? Women. Well, there's an excess of chads. There's a supply increase of chads. There's far too many chads. You may be wondering, if there's too many chads, where are they? Because I don't see the chads. That's because you're not being shown the chads. The women are seeing all the chads, and you aren't seeing the chads because they're a very small number of the population, and also you don't notice them because you're a man. And if you're a chad, then you probably know this, but the value of chad is high. So what's the culprit? The culprit is the dating apps, because on the dating apps, you can see, you swipe, 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 most of the men are just ignored. It's like they're not even real people. It's like the whole math thing with like the ghost, right? You don't even see them. What you see is the Chad. And the Chad talks to you. Maybe he says something a little stupid, but man, he does have abs. The Chad will talk to you. The Chad will take you on a date. The Chad will take you back to his apartment. The Chad will bed you. You get stuck on the highest setting. You may have heard that term before. So what happens is women get basically switched to turn on to think that there's all these men of this high attractiveness. And because the female sexual experience is a lot about filtering and rejecting and selecting, they keep selecting Chad and they keep ending up in situationships or one night stands or things that they don't want. This is bad for women as well as it is for men. But the perception is that, I am this valuable because I was able to command the attention of this really attractive man. And I think the danger zone for Hoeflation is not the 9s or 10s. Life probably didn't change too much for them. They always had as much male attention as they really needed and could select whatever partner they really wanted. They had a lot of options. And having a dating app didn't really change all that much for them. But if you were like a 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, then I think that's the danger zone for Hoeflation, because a dude who's like a 9, who's really attractive, will take home a 5 or even a 4. He will take them home and he will put that as a notch in the bedpost. Why? Because men seek variety, and it's available, and it's an option. And so if it's an option and it's easy, they feel like they can get it easily without much effort. Maybe the 9 or the 10 will require a lot of effort, will ask a lot of them. Then yeah, they're gonna ask out the 5, they're gonna ask out the 4, and they're gonna take the easy access to sex, and that's what they're gonna have. And sometimes men just want variety too. That's another thing. So an anecdote you may have heard with Gene Simmons. Rhodey saw Gene Simmons walking back to his hotel room with like a super frumpy girl, like not attractive, like chubby and stuff. And he's like, why are you taking her up? You could have any woman in this concert hall. You could have had anyone. And he's like, man, you can have you can have filet mignon every night, but sometimes you just want a hamburger. Right. But that creates the Hoeflation. It's all perception. It's all perception of how much stuff is out there. So there's a perception that there's all these attractive men and they're interested in you. And so your requirements are really high. But all of that trickles down so that the rest of the men who get nothing are willing to settle for far less than they would have maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And that's really unfortunate because desperate men usually aren't that attractive to women. And men end up in a bad situation where they're like, I talked about this with like the borderline personality girls, where men get really excited because they've never had that level of female attention. They've never had a woman seems super interested in them, and it's this exciting moment, and then it turns all around and they're just trying to salvage this relationship because women haven't been super interested in them before, and it's because this person has a personality disorder. They have a mental illness. They're not doing it because they're evil on their own, but they almost can't help themselves. But men will try to salvage terrible relationships because they just feel like they don't have any other options. That's Hoeflation. And the big problem with all of this is that women really are not getting what they want either. Women are being used, and that diminishes their self-esteem, diminishes their value to other men in a lot of cases. And men that they would normally have ended up with 30 or 40 years ago and been able to like develop a happy and solid relationship with, they're never meeting that man. And when they do meet him, they are so damaged from mismanaging the dating market that they ruin that relationship, or that relationship, the guy figures out it's just not worth it to him and he'd rather be alone. So it's bad for everyone. And the main culprit is the dating apps. But I think the dating apps are still one step removed from the deeper issue, which is that we just don't have ways for people to meet each other anymore. Our filters for meeting other people have been broken as our societies become more atomized. I think the COVID thing probably really accelerated this, where there's fewer in-person meetings. You don't see people at the office as much. There's more online kind of, especially if you're an information worker, it's more online. Schools are online, classes are online. It used to be you would meet your spouse at college, or you would meet her at at some sort of social event where you're able to make a connection. I could tell you how I met my wife. Now, we didn't get together right away, but I'll tell you how we met, because there's always a cutesy story. Older folks, we have these cutesy stories of how we met our spouses. I was talking to my friend John the other day, and how he met his wife, and they met basically through like a Young Republicans convention, and they were in completely different cities, but they met a couple times. They made a connection, and like eventually they were able to just be together and get married and have a bunch of kids. It's great. Like what a fantastic story that they met through this activity. Well, I met my wife at college. Whoa, and it was a music theory class. I sat down. She sat like right by me. I think she was actually right behind me. And I remember she just had these beautiful eyes. But anyway, we didn't date right away. It took us years. We were involved with other people. We don't need to get into it. But we had the same backpack. So I was able to have a conversation with her right away. And I remember the teacher called her name wrong in roll because she has a Dutch name. It's Houkje, but it's Houkje, Hoekje, right? And Benjamin Boone was his name, and he's a guy who never blinks. And so his eyes are like open like this, like whites all the way around. That's the way he looks. I'm going to say this name wrong, Hoekje. And it's like, it's Houkje. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting name. It's Dutch. And so I had all these ways that I could just have an instant connection with this person, had a friendship. We maintained that friendship, reconnected romantically years later. But we had that initial connection where it got past that first filter of I don't know you, in a familiar, neutral environment where we got to know each other as music students. I feel like any of those environments that still exist are more hostile than they used to be. Anytime I step into them, I'm more aware of this hostility between the sexes. It happened, you used to have office romances years ago, and that started to go away when you started getting all of these sexual harassment claims. And so if you're a man and you're in an office, the general advice is you got to cover your ass. You can't be having office romances because that exposes you to a huge amount of risk. You can't ask a woman out at the office because that could be construed as sexual harassment. And that's one of the things they teach you in training. It's about how that other person feels. It's not what you intended. It's about how they feel about it. And so no more dating in the workplace. You have to be extremely cautious about that. So one of those places that people used to make that connection in the office. It's sort of out of bounds now. In colleges, you want to avoid the same thing. It's kind of out of bounds now. Or all your classes are online, so you never meet the other person. And so dating apps filled in that hole that had been created over years of our culture being hollowed out. Fewer people going to church. And I don't think go to church to meet a girl is a good piece of advice. I've talked about this in the comments recently. It's not good advice, mostly because Hoeflation will distort things. You don't want to be the guy who's being asked to like pick up the pieces of the broken woman who came back to church. But that's an edge case in my opinion. The real reason is that that's just the wrong reason to go to church. Like you want to go to church because you believe that you should go to church, not because you're trying to meet someone. But church used to be the main thing that bound communities together, which meant that you would make a lot of connections there. You would know the other families, you would know the other people there. And then even if you didn't know someone in that, say in that congregation, you knew the families, they knew someone that was eligible. Maybe they'd introduce you. Maybe you'd be able to, maybe there's like a retreat, there's a conference, and you're able to like get to meet this person and make a connection, and then that connection eventually develops into a relationship. Those things have been hollowed out. They've been very hollowed out in our culture over years. So online dating really filled a need that was there, which is that young people didn't have a way to meet each other as easily as they used to in the past. And the places where they did meet each other were a lot more hostile. There's a lot more risk involved with having those connections in those places. So the dating apps are neutral. It's like a neutral place for people to meet. It's a safe place for people to meet. It's a safe way to figure it out. But you're always meeting strangers, and your first filter is the visuals. That's why you have this looks maxing thing. And I've talked about looks maxing before. That's the first filter. The first filter you have to get through, whether you're a man or a woman, is the attractiveness filter. The thing is, right now, men have to be really attractive to be successful on dating apps. At least that's what the data shows. And there's other videos you can watch that really go deep into the data. Whereas women really don't need to be. That's the Hoeflation. Is like men are so desperate, they will swipe on a fat girl that while they're fit because they just are craving a connection. They want someone to have a relationship with. They want to have that romance of any kind. They start to get desperate, and that's what it is, right? It's just the standards are warped. They're not meeting properly anymore. And I think it's because the first filter is looks, and looks are going to select for only the best looking men. It's something to do with like female psychology and physiology, is that if they don't know the man, they perceive most men as being unattractive. That's just the way it works, okay? But if you meet on neutral ground, you start making that connection. Women tend to look at more of the whole package of a man, and then and then then it's a little bit easier to go to that next step. They start to like you, and as they like you, they like the way you look more, if that makes any sense. Now, keep in mind, I've been out of this game forever, and I'm glad. I was sitting down with my wife tonight, and she opened up her Kindle app and was like looking through Kindle books, right? And I realized we have the same Kindle account, right? And I don't know how this happened, where like our Amazon accounts, at one point we had separate Amazon accounts, and now they've like merged into one Amazon account somehow. I'm not really aware of how this happened, but I'm looking at all these books. Some of the books are books that she read. Some of the books are books that I read. She's scrolling through books from like 10 years ago. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a free book I never read. And that was a book I bought like 10 years ago that sucked. And I remember that, and oh, that must be one of your books. And I was like, we can never break up. We have we share a Kindle library. We can't separate that. No, this is the last stop. There are no other options besides this. We can't detangle our Kindle library. I have a Netflix profile on your account. No, it's off the table. Divorce can never happen. We're too tangled. We can't ever separate. It's just not possible, right? And honestly, I would never. Anytime I would ever, and I don't ever have these feelings, but it's like, just think about how bad it is to date. I am so glad that I'm older and that I was able to meet people in real life and make those connections and date people that I met and could get to know, you know, and get through those filters. It's so much harder now, and I'm really sorry if you're younger and you're dealing with this, because I feel that it's bad for men and women. Women aren't getting what they want because what they want is like a committed relationship, but they're not getting that through the dating apps, and men aren't getting that either. So it's an unfortunate situation. What's the solution? I don't really have a solution except that like our culture needs to be repaired on some of these more neutral meeting places. I will give you a neutral meeting place that was suggested to me and suggested to others several times from some mutuals on Twitter, which is take up dancing. Now I remember this from 25 years ago is that there was like a salsa dancing class over at the Starline. I don't know what it's called now in Fresno, but like, dude, that was the place to meet girls. And you could meet women of all different ages. And even if it wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to meet someone to date, it's like having that conversation and getting to know that person and having that experience of knowing what other people, who they are and what, just getting to know people and getting to some experience talking to women. That was like a valuable experience. But take up like ballroom dancing. There's usually a shortage of men because men find dancing embarrassing, but it's okay. You go to a class, they're teaching you how to do it. You get to mix up with a lot of different partners and women and get to know them, and you're getting through that first filter. Then they know you. Then they can ask personal questions about you, and then they might start to see you as maybe more than just a dance partner, maybe a friend, maybe something more than a friend. So we need more of those spaces that are like that. And that's just one that was suggested. And that's probably a pretty good one for men because of the, you know, the possible imbalance towards women on that side. But maybe there's other ones that are like that. The main thing is that dating apps for most men are going to be a huge waste of time. That's what I'm gathering. That's not from my experience of having used them. If you've used them, I would love to have your feedback down below, as well as any advice that you have for other people for how to do this. Going to church is probably like, that's one filter that you can have, but it's more like you need to be part of a community where you can make connections and then eventually make a connection that could be romantic later on. But yeah, I would love to have your opinions on that. It's a major problem with young people that I gather. And so I would love to have some of your stories and some of your feedback on that. And I will check you all next time. Have a great, great day. Fellow wizards. Don't be a wizard.